Good day, fellow servants in ministry. How you doing? I just finished the last lecture and I was just kind of really pumped with it and everything. So I just decided, let's do the next one. I realized there's a few days gap here, but I just went ahead and just said, you know what? I just want to do another one right now. The last one we did was the right relationship in ministry towards your pastor. And we talked about be real. Let's all say it together. Be real, be ready, be right. Okay, that's the best thing. We talked about job descriptions. Now, earlier in the semester when we were all together, I talked to you about how to appeal to authority. That lecture really does follow the one that we just did. I gave it to you earlier. I would just like to mention that real quickly. Do you guys remember that about how to appeal to authority? Because it follows well the right relationship with your pastor. I want to tell you something, students. You always have the right to appeal to your authority. Now, sometimes I know it feels really uncomfortable. And I know sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to, rock the apple cart or whatever, but you do have the right to appeal. I do think that if you follow the 4 steps, it'll make a difference. They were on your midterm. Hopefully you remember. Discover the motive of why you're going. Because maybe the reason why you feel bad about going to authority is you got the wrong motive. But you say, no, this is very concerning to me. Discover your motive. Number 2, develop the wording. I think that's going to help you so much, even to a point where you write it out. I want to think about what I'm going to say to pastor and how I'm going to approach him. Number 3, discern the time. When do you send it? When do you send it? I tell you, these things are so good if you practice these. And then number 4, determine your response before going. No matter what pastor says, I'm going to be fine with it. Whatever my supervisor tells me, I'm going to be good with it. And, I'm going to go to appeal. I think it's when you respond like that, that God then begins to work on that authority if the Lord wants your appeal to go through. I think then it's a God thing and it's not a you personality thing. So discover the motive, develop the wording, discern the time, and determine your response. All right, so today's lecture is lecture number 7, the neighbor principle. I love my title here. And like a good neighbor, a Christian is there. So take your Bibles and turn to Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37, the neighbor principle. Boy, you want to have good relationships in the ministry? Learn the neighbor principle. Hey, you know what we got to do? We just have to read the Good Samaritan, the neighbor principle. Listen to Luke chapter 10, verse 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, well, what is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy strength and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he, Jesus, said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, don't you love when Jesus answers with a story? And Jesus answering said, Certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. By chance, there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise, a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, and pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, When he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, Well, he that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. The neighbor principle, and like a good neighbor, a Christian is there. Let's look very quickly at the neighbor principle and utilizing that in ministry. Look at number 1. The neighbor principle is not about finding your neighbor. It's about being a neighbor. Now you need to hear that. The neighbor principle is not about finding your neighbor. The neighbor principle, what Jesus said to that man that day, was actually being a neighbor. And gang, we can all be neighbors to the people that we work with in ministry. Who is my neighbor? Yeah, those on the mission field with you, those on the church staff, those that are closest to you are your neighbors. You can pick your neighborhood, but you don't get to pick your neighbors. You can pick, so whatever ministry, you get to pick your church, but you don't get to pick who you work with. And we need to realize that our neighbors are those people that are closest to us. You want to be a neighbor. There is no such thing as your little circle of neighbors, okay? There's no such thing as that. You can have, I have a little circle of friends, my little clique, okay? But you can't have this is my little circle of neighbors. No. Your neighbors, that person closest to you, and that person that's in need, that you can be a neighbor to. This principle goes beyond what we want from a relationship to what others need from a relationship. Yeah, I think we look at our neighbors and what we can get from them. We need to be looking at our neighbors, what we can give onto them. Number 1, the neighbor principle is not about finding your neighbor, it's about being a neighbor. Number 2, the neighbor principle makes any person you can help your neighbor. Anyone that you can help. Okay, this was a Samaritan. The Hebrews and the Samaritans didn't even talk to each other. But that Hebrew had a need. So that Samaritan was going to be a neighbor. The neighbor principle makes any person you can help your neighbor. Come on, what's going on with this virus? Listen, there are people, if you get out of your home, and I don't know what's happening right now where you live, but by the way, the people you live with become your neighbors. Some of them are scared to death right now. You need to be a good neighbor and help them. Some people that you're living with maybe have some physical needs right now. Maybe you're living with someone that's a little sick. Hey, be a good neighbor now and be what they need. This principle has no laws. This principle only has love. Isn't that good? The neighbor principle doesn't have laws to it. The neighbor principle only has love. It is not limited by people. It's not limited by time. It's not limited by cost, and it's not limited by obstacles. Listen, right now, gang, every one of you have a neighbor that probably needs you to be a neighbor to, that has a need, and you need to be a good neighbor. Number 3, the neighbor principle is your greatest evangelistic tool in sharing the gospel. Now, so far in class, we have talked pretty much all about relationships within the ministry with other believers, whether it's the church, volunteers, or on the church staff or the pastor. But we do have in ministry relationships with unsaved people. They may be coming to work at the church. They may be a contractor. They may be people we do vending with or whatever. Develop. And when you have a butcher that you get meat from for the ministry that you do, or you have a painter or a landscaper that comes over to the church, and build relationships. And when you find they have a need, man, you are all over that. The development of being a neighbor to somebody in need is probably the greatest evangelistic tool to be able to share with them the gospel one day. Going the second mile with anyone will open their heart to truth. Now, this is bigger than you think. Going the second mile with anyone will open their heart to the truth. Never have I ever done anything neighborly to someone in the airport, to someone at a store, to help them carry out their groceries or whatever, have them go in line in front of me, or get the last item, the last loaf of bread, the last gallon of milk, the last dozen of eggs, that you don't get an opportunity to witness to them about Christ. You will never do a second mile neighbor principle to anyone that's lost that you won't have an opportunity after you do that. Why did you do that? Why would you do this for me? I'm telling you, it ushers the possibility for the gospel unbelievably. And then number 4, and we're done for the day. Number 4, the neighbor principle is the bedrock to all good relationships. It really is. I think the neighbor principle is where everything begins. Children must learn it. I think this is one of the greatest principles you ought to teach children in the children's church, is the good neighbor principle, the good Samaritan principle. Adults must show it. Children must learn it. Adults must show it. Christians must use it. And our neighbors must experience it. Let me go through that again. Children must learn it. Adults must show it. Christians must use it. And our neighbors must experience it. Listen, I think the bedrock of all relationships is this forgiveness. I understand that, but then it's also helping others. And if you're good neighbors to somebody, I got to tell you what, you're going to have a good relationship with them. I love the title of this little lesson, The Neighbor Principle. And like a good neighbor, a Christian is there. You know, if we say that we know Christ, let's be good neighbors. Don't look for good neighbors. Be a good neighbor. That's what that Samaritan did with that Hebrew that on the road to Jericho. And let me encourage you to do that today. And I guarantee you, I know that we're kind of isolated right now, but there's people in your life right now that are your neighbors. It may be your mom, it may be your dad, it may be your siblings. And sometimes, and maybe you're living in a neighborhood you don't want to be in right now. But I guarantee you, there's a neighbor that needs you today. So you be that, and let us know about how that develops the relationship. Make sure you're doing your projects. We're a little bit away from, we've got another lesson or so before the next. We have one more lesson before we have, then we'll have a test after that as well. Hope you guys are doing well. Send me your prayer requests. Bye-bye.